present, it's not a new training rep scheme or anything like that. It's actually what you might call a training methodology here. And it's called J-reps or J-rep zone training. It's not very well known from what I've seen because I really recently just came across it for the first time. And I've been doing this for a long ass time. Now, if you're not really paying close attention to this video, what I do here is going to sound like 21s to you, which is basically where you just do 7 reps in the extended position, 7 in the middle, and 7 in the top. I mean, we used to do that back in high school for bicep curls. It doesn't really work for any other exercise. But there's not really much science behind it. It creates a pump, but mostly that's just because you're doing so many reps. Okay, this is much more logical, and I assume it would be backed by science if there were actually any studies about it. But what it is a marriage between high intensity training, so pushing low number of sets, very close to failure, and high volume training, which stresses the number of reps. So you're able to push the intensity very hard while still doing a lot of, coupling to create contraction and decoupling to create the eccentric movement, which itself, that sort of coupling, decoupling action could be a driver of muscle growth. Okay, so here's an example of how it would work, and then I'll extrapolate it. So if we're doing bicep curls, which is an easy one to demonstrate on, which is why I'm using it, okay, what you would do is start with the hardest part of the rep. So for a bicep curl, the sticking point always seems to be right around this middle portion, right? So I'm going to start by just basically ironing out the middle portion of that rep. And I'm aiming to hit failure or very close to failure at around 8 reps. Okay, 8 reps. Now you do that by slowing down the rep, by creating more tension on the eccentric. If you're an intermediate lifter or you have a decent amount of experience, certainly if you're advanced, you should be able to target 8 reps as your failure with a wide range of different weights here. You won't need to use anything heavy for this. It works with much lighter weights. These are 7.5 kilos, so not very much. Okay, now if you're a beginner, this might not be the best choice for you. You might go with something simpler and work on it until you can get up to being able to do this kind of stuff. Okay, so I'd start there. Then I would go to the next hardest. So the hardest is this mid portion. Next hardest is the top portion of the rep. So I'm going to do 8 to failure again there. And once I crap out on that one, I'm going to go to the easiest portion of the rep, which is this portion. Okay, so I'll demonstrate it, then I'll explain why it works and how you can extrapolate to other exercises. There are a few. Intensity is a huge driver of hypertrophy, but also just volume. There's a dose-dependent response, so more volume in terms of actual, like changing directions and moving the weight may also be driving it. We're not exactly sure how much either one, but you can do both, you might as well. The problem with normal high-intensity training is that you have to dial that volume way back down. And the problem with high volume is that you can't really go intense. But by doing this, you basically can push to absolute muscle fatigue and accumulate way more reps. So like if I got 8, 8, 8, right? That's 24 reps as opposed to just going to 8 or 10. So more than double the number of actual reps that I'm doing, okay? Another point to be aware of that's important here is that your muscle is different, has different strength in different ranges of motion, right? As I just demonstrated there. So your biceps are strongest here, least strong here, and sort of second strongest, second weakest up here. And so when you're just doing a single set, single high intensity set, and you push it to failure, your failure is always going to be here, but that doesn't mean that you actually completely fatigue the muscle. You could still do more up here and more down here. So by doing it this way, it's basically providing a sort of deload. It's almost like a superset for the muscle, where you're going with the hardest range of motion, which equates to the hardest weight, essentially. So you're lifting the most first, and then you're decreasing it by a little bit by increasing your mechanical advantage, and then again, maybe not mechanical, but neuromuscular advantage, you're doing that again. Okay, so in that way it combines all three of them, and it's pretty awesome. Now, you can extrapolate what I just did there to all sorts of other exercises, right? Like if you were going to do, let's say, a bench press. So I just did a bunch of these with different kinds of exercises to see how it would work out. But if you're doing a bench press, you know, what's the hardest part of the bench press? Well, it's going to be this sort of right around here. This is where you always get stuck. It's not right there, right? And it's not right there. It's somewhere in the middle. So you could iron that out, go to close to failure there, then do maybe right here in the stretch position, and then go out to the extended position, right? You could also do this in 2 half sets, where you might do the bottom portion of the bench for up to 8 or so, and then do the top portion. But sorry, not up to 8. If you're going to do it in just half sets, or in half range of motion sets, then you'd want to go with up to 12, I believe is what the creator says is optimal. So up to 12, getting the failure with when you're doing half range of motion sets. Okay. Now, in general, in principle, usually it's going to be the center portion of the rep that is the hardest, and so that's the portion you're going to want to start with, right? But if you're unsure, just figure out where it is that you fail. When you reach failure on exercise, where do you reach failure? Now, if you reach failure in the bottom portion, maybe that's the portion you need to start with. But, you know, generally it will be the middle portion, okay? So that's bench press. I mean, you can do shoulder press, right? It would be the same sort of deal, right? Generally, you're going to fail right around here, so start with this range of motion there, then work the low range of motion, and then work the high range of motion, okay? If you're doing something like squats, right, generally you're gonna fail right around, not at the very bottom position, but like right, just coming up just a little bit right around there. So start right in here, and then go to low and go to high. I did a single leg Bulgarian split squats earlier with this, and it was freaking brutal. And the worst part about it, the hardest part about it was the last third of the set, where I was just doing, you know, like this little bit of leg extension at the top, which is normally a piece of cake. But I was so fatigued already that what is typically a kind of meaningless junk volume portion of the range of motion becomes a really meaningful fatigue-inducing, you know, load, or, you know, whatever portion. Anyway, that's J-reps, or J-rep zone training, or I'm not sure exactly what kind of name to call it by. Came up with it by a guy named Brian Johnson, and I just came across it, and give it a try, and I hope that it works out great for you. And if it does, or it doesn't, let me know. Thanks.